September 15, 1940, 11:45 a.m., 18,000 feet above the Thames estuary, Kent, England. The air is not still, it is a screaming, shuddering medium of force and metal. For Pilot Officer Peter Simpson of No. 303 Polish Squadron, RAF, the cockpit of his Hawker Hurricane, a bubble of roaring calm. The smell is hot oil, cordite from his last dogfight, and the cold, thin oxygen feeding his mask. Through his canopy, the world is a vast diorama of chaos. Below, the quilted fields of Kent are a green and brown blur. Above, the high-altitude contrails of the Spitfire squadrons streak the blue like chalk marks. And ahead, blotting out the sun, is the real threat. A slow, dark river of aircraft, hundreds of them. He counts instinctively Heinkel 111 bombers, holding formation with a lumbering, menacing discipline. Dornier 17s, the flying pencils, sleek and fast. A protective swarm of Messerschmitt Bf 109s dances and weaves around them, their yellow-nosed fighters bright as wasps. This is the height of the Battle of Britain. What was meant to be Atlantic, Eagle Day, has stretched into a brutal, months-long campaign. Today, Hitler wants London broken. Today, Reichsmarshal Göring has promised the Führer that the Royal Air Force will be swept from the sky. But the Luftwaffe is not alone up here. Around Peter's Hurricane, the other cuckoos of 303 Squadron hold tight formation. They are the foreigners, the exiles, the men Göring's intelligence dismissed as insignificant. Poles, Czechs, Canadians, New Zealanders. Men who had seen their homelands crushed under the treads of panzers and the bombs of these very same Heinkels. They didn't always need to understand the clipped, calm orders from RAF Fighter Command. They understood the shape of the bombers. They understood revenge. Bandits, 12 o'clock high, Angels 20. The squadron leader's voice, cool as ice, crackles in his ear. Tally-ho, the order is a release. Peter shoves the throttle forward, the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine behind him responding with a deep-throated bellow. The Hurricane, less graceful than a Spitfire but a stable, rugged gun platform, surges upward. The world tilts, the G-force presses him into his seat. His focus narrows to a single Heinkel, its black crosses stark against the gray fuselage. He sees the dorsal gunner swiveling his machine gun towards him, a tiny, determined figure in a glass bubble. He holds his dive. The mantra of his training runs through his head. Wait. Wait until you see the rivets, then let them have it. The bomber grows, filling his reflector sight. He can see the individual panes of the cockpit glass. At 250 yards, his thumb presses down on the gun button. The Hurricane shudders violently as 303 Browning machine guns in its wings unleash a 4-second burst. Tracer fire stitches a line of brilliant white through the sky, walking up the Heinkel's wing route. Pieces fly. A flash of orange erupts from the port engine, then blooms into a fierce, hungry flame. The Heinkel lurches, then begins its long, final descent, trailing a plume of black smoke like a funeral banner. There's no time to watch it fall. A shadow flashes over his canopy, a snarl of cannon fire. A Bf 109, having broken from its high cover, has him in its sights. Peter throws the Hurricane into a violent, corkscrewing dive, the centrifugal force draining blood from his head, his vision graying at the edges. He hears the thump-thump-thump of German 20mm cannon shells passing through the space where his fuselage was just a second ago. This is the dance. The bombers were the target, but the 109s were the executioners. In this moment, the fate of Britain hung not on grand strategy, but on the skill of a young Polish pilot in a borrowed fighter and on 10,000 moments, just like it happening all across the bright besieged sky of southern England. These men, the pilots of 303 Squadron, were considered outsiders by some, but they would go on to become the highest-scoring Allied fighter squadron of the entire Battle of Britain. Their kill-to-loss ratio was staggering. They flew with a ferocity born from loss and a desperation to strike back at the enemy who had taken their homes. When you look at the raw numbers, It's astonishing. In just 42 days of fighting, the squadron claimed 126 enemy aircraft destroyed. Men like Witold Urbanovich, Jan Zumbach, and Joseph František became legends, their names whispered with awe in the mess halls and airfields across the country. They brought new tactics to the fight, often breaking formation to dive headlong into the German bomber streams, causing chaos and confusion. Their methods were sometimes seen as undisciplined by the more traditional RAF commanders, but no one could argue with the results. What drove them was more than just duty. For many, it was personal. They had seen their country fall in a matter of weeks. They had escaped across Europe, often with nothing but the clothes on their backs, driven by a singular purpose: to continue the fight. Flying for the RAF gave them that chance. The Hawker Hurricane, a plane they initially found themselves in, was a perfect tool for their brand of aggressive combat. It was tough, able to absorb incredible punishment, and its 8 machine guns could tear a bomber apart in a single, well-aimed burst. The story of 303 Squadron is a powerful reminder that victory is often forged by those with the most to lose. While British pilots like the famous few rightly earned their place in history for defending their homeland, the contribution of these exiled pilots was absolutely crucial. They didn't just supplement the RAF's numbers. They brought a unique skill and a burning motivation that turned the tide in some of the most critical days of the war. Their presence in the sky was a shock to the Luftwaffe pilots, who had been told the RAF was on its last legs. Instead, they faced a new, ferocious, and highly skilled opponent. The battle over London on September 15th became known as Battle of Britain Day. It was a massive, all-out assault by the Luftwaffe, and it was decisively repulsed. The RAF claimed 185 German aircraft shot down, a number later revised, but which at the time was a colossal blow to German morale and a huge victory for the British. 303 Squadron alone claimed 14 confirmed kills on that day. Green's promise to Hitler was broken. The invasion of Britain, Operation Sea Lion, was postponed indefinitely. The legacy of these pilots is a testament to courage in the face of overwhelming odds. They were the cuckoos in the eagle's nest, fighting for a country that wasn't their own, but for a cause that united them all: freedom. While Peter Simpson fights for his life in the sun-drenched chaos above Kent, a very different kind of battle is being waged 80 miles away. It's happening in the perpetual artificial twilight of an underground operations room, a place called Bentley Priory, the headquarters of RAF Fighter Command. The time is 7 minutes past noon. Here, deep beneath the earth, the air is cool, stale, and thick with cigarette smoke and tension. There is no roar of engines, only the low hum of generators, the constant clatter of teleprinters, and the murmur of quiet, urgent voices. This is the unseen heart of the battle, a world away from the dogfights raging in the sky. In a room known as the filter room, young women of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, the WAAF, are hard at work. They wear headphones, their faces intent, and wield long croupier-like rakes. With these rakes, they move colored wooden blocks across a vast map table that represents the whole of England. Each block is a raid, a potential death sentence falling from the sky. But their information doesn't come from looking up. It comes from the eerie, unseen pulses of radio waves. Stretching along Britain's coastal cliffs and rolling hills is a chain of massive, rotating lattice towers. This is the chain home radar system, crude, revolutionary, and utterly secret. These towers can't see individual aircraft, not yet. But they can detect the faint electronic echo of a mass of metal, a formation of bombers and fighters, 100 miles out over the English Channel. When a radar operator in a wind-swept hut sees this faint blip on their cathode ray tube, they don't have time to wonder. They pick up a telephone, and the report is instantly relayed to Bentley Priory. Here, in the filter room, officers hunched over their own maps must interpret this raw data. They have to estimate the raid's height, its numbers, its course. Is it a friendly bomber squadron returning home, a stray weather aircraft lost in the clouds. Or it's at the leading edge of a German group of Dornier bombers, the vanguard of the attack. This is a high-stakes guessing game, but one based on experience and cold logic. Every second counts. Once a plot is filtered and deemed hostile, the information is passed on again, by more WAAF plotters, into the very nerve center of the entire operation, the operations room itself. Entering this room is like stepping into a cathedral of war. It's a vast, two-story space, dominated by a dense map of Britain and the channel covering an entire wall, all protected by a clear perspex sheet. Down on the floor level, the plotters, the same young women from the other rooms, move the colored blocks across this vertical map, their movements precise and practiced, tracking the filtered reports as they come in. They are the hands of the system. And on a raised dais, a balcony overlooking this constantly shifting mosaic of threat, sits the man upon whom this entire system converges. He is the brain, Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, the Commander-in-Chief of Fighter Command, known as Stuffy to his men. Dowding is a gaunt, austere figure, often seeming more like a ghost than a man of flesh and blood. He rarely speaks, he just sits, his hands clasped, his piercing eyes fixed on the map, watching the patterns form, the threats coalesce. He is the silent conductor of this symphony of defense. Around him, officers from the Army and the Royal Navy watch the same map, their faces etched with their own anxieties. They are waiting for the answer to the ultimate question: is this it? Is this the true invasion? Are the troop ships and landing barges gathering in the French ports at this very moment? The fate of the nation hangs on the movements of these little wooden blocks. To Dowding's right stand his senior staff, including the intense, energetic Air Vice Marshal Keith Park. Park, a New Zealander, commands the Critical 11 Group, the sector responsible for defending London and the entire southeast of England. He is the man on the hot seat. Right now, Park is on one of his dedicated telephones, his voice sharp with the clipped cadence of his native land. His eyes are locked on the mass of red blocks converging over the coastal towns of Dover and Folkestone. He doesn't see individual pilots like Peter Simpson. He doesn't see the bravery or the terror, the smoke trails or the parachutes. He sees vectors, fuel states, and squadron readiness charts. He sees a problem of time and space. Kenley, Tangmere, Biggin Hill. He barks into the receiver, naming the key airfields under his command. Scramble, Angels 1-5, Vector 130. Intercept. His order is not a guess. It is the end product of the entire Dowding system. This is what it was all built for, a centralized, technologically augmented nervous system that turns fragmented radar pulses and reports from the observer corps on the ground into a single, coherent tactical picture. This system allows Park and his fellow commanders to do something the Luftwaffe planners thought impossible. It allows them to hold their precious fighter squadrons on the ground until the last possible moment. This conserves fuel, which was always in short supply, and saves the pilots from exhausting, fruitless patrols. Then, at the perfect moment, it allows them to direct those squadrons precisely onto the incoming raids. Park is playing a desperate game of high-stakes chess with the Luftwaffe. His pieces are not made of wood or ivory. They are young men in Spitfires and Hurricanes, human pieces who are, at this very moment, bleeding and burning in the sky above. Every decision he makes in the cool, quiet of this room has immediate, violent consequences miles away and thousands of feet in the air. The system is not perfect, it has weaknesses. The radar beams are aimed high, so fast, low-level raids can sometimes slip underneath, undetected until they are already overhead. The estimates of enemy numbers are often just that, estimates, and they can be wildly wrong, and the telephone lines that connect this whole network are vulnerable. A single well-placed bomb could sever a vital link. But for all its flaws, the Dowding system gives the outnumbered Royal Air Force a fighting chance. It is the great equalizer. It multiplies the effectiveness of every pilot and every plane. It allows them to be in the right place, at the right time, again and again, So every time a squadron of Spitfires roars into the sky and, against all odds, appears directly in the path of a German bomber stream, it's not luck. It's because a WAF plotter in a dark, stuffy room moved a small block of wood. It's because a radar operator in a lonely coastal station saw a faint, ghostly flicker on a screen and understood what it meant. And it's because the mind of Hugh Dowding, sitting in the silent gloom of Bentley Priory, had already calculated the odds, weighed the risks, and put the pieces in motion. The Battle of Britain was not just fought in the air, it was won here, in this room. A battle where the weapons were not cannons and machine guns, but intellect, logistics, and the cold, unwavering nerve of a few who saw the whole picture. The battle Peter Simpson fought over the fields was just a prelude. The real target of the Armada was already passing under his hurricane, its deadly payload falling away. The first bombs tumbled from the Heinkels and Dorniers, not onto airfields or radar stations, but onto the docks, warehouses, and homes of East London. It's 4:55 p.m., the Port of London, Silver Town. A monstrous, rolling thunder drowns out the world. It's not one explosion, but a tectonic wave of them. High explosive bombs, some weighing over 2,000 kilograms. The monstrous Satan bomb crater the docks. Cranes become twisted skeletons, and the Thames erupts in fountains of mud and water. But the high explosives are just the opening act. Following them comes the true horror, the incendiaries. Thousands of slender magnesium canisters rain down, sounding like shrapnel on slate roofs. Within seconds, they ignite with a chemical fury, burning at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, impossible to extinguish with water. For fire watcher Arthur Davies, a docker by trade, the theory he'd learned becomes a choking, blinding reality. He's standing on the roof of a grain silo, a stirrup pump and a bucket of sand at his feet. The heat from 100 individual blazes washes over his face. The sky, once blue, is now a hellish orange canopy, choked with black, oily smoke that completely blots out the sun. The incendiaries clatter and fizz, setting fire to everything they touch. Timber yards, paint factories, rows of terraced houses. The separate fires begin to join, feeding on the oxygen sucked from the narrow streets, creating their own wind of firestorm. Down below, in the labyrinth of streets like Wapping and Limehouse, the air raid wardens are fighting their own desperate battle. Their world is one of fractured senses. The scream of the sirens has been replaced by the roar of the flames, the whistle of more falling bombs, and the constant, terrifying crash of collapsing buildings. Mrs. Elsie Manning, wearing her ARP helmet and a determined frown, shepherds a family from a crumbling house. The children are wailing, their faces smudged with soot. The road is a carpet of broken glass that crunches underfoot like ice. A water main has been severed, and a fountain erupts uselessly into a burning building. This is the Blitz. This is Hermann Göring's strategic shift. Frustrated by his failure to destroy the Royal Air Force in the sky, he has turned his fury on the population, aiming to shatter British morale. But in the burning streets of London, something else is being forged. The warden's post, staffed by volunteers like Elsie, becomes a makeshift command center. The deep, brick-lined Anderson shelters in back gardens, and the cavernous, stifling London tube stations become defiant communal bunkers. When people emerge from these shelters, they aren't broken refugees. They are a ragged army of responders, digging neighbors out of the rubble with their bare hands, brewing tea on makeshift stoves right there amidst the ruins. The view from a Luftwaffe bomber above is one of satisfying, terrifying destruction, a map of hell. But on the ground, the tenacity is visceral and personal. It's Arthur Davies, his face blistered, beating at an incendiary bomb with a shovel until it's finally smothered in sand. It's Elsie Manning, her voice hoarse from shouting, guiding a rescue squad toward a trapped voice calling from the debris. The RAF had saved the skies. Now, the ordinary people of London were being asked to save their city from the ground. And as night deepened on September 15th, the fires lighting up the bellies of the clouds didn't signal surrender. They served as a vast, defiant beacon of a nation that was still fighting. The courage and resilience shown on this day set the tone for the months to come. It was a brutal test of a city and its people. Thank you for watching. Dawn, September 16, 1940. RAF Biggin Hill, Kent. The airfield is a deep scar carved into the green landscape of southern England. Fresh craters from yesterday's Stuka dive bombing attack pockmark the grass runway, and the morning air is thick with a strange mixture: the scent of damp earth, the acrid tang of burned fuel, and the lingering ghost of high explosives. For the ground crews, the night has offered no rest. Sleep is a luxury they cannot afford. Under the dim, hooded lights that try to hide them from enemy bombers, they've been engaged in ceaseless, back-breaking labor. These men are the forgotten army of the battle. Their war fought not in the skies, but on the ground with spanners, rags, and sheer, unrelenting grit. Leading aircraftman Tom Perkins, his hands black with oil and decorated with a dozen fresh cuts, gives the port upper cowling of Spitfire in 3-1 to 3 a final, firm slap. Inside, its Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, still warm from its last frantic sortie, has been given a hurried, desperate overhaul. A patched bullet hole in the rudder, the stark reminder of yesterday's fight, marked with a patch of bright fabric. The aircraft is far from perfect, but it is serviceable. And in these desperate days, serviceable is the only standard that matters. All along the dispersal pens, men just like Tom are performing mechanical miracles. They're changing spark plugs with numb fingers, rearming belts of 303 ammunition, and patching torn fuselages with doped fabric. They refuel the planes from Bowsers that are themselves prime targets for the next raid. Their work is a race against time, a frantic effort to put fighters back into the air. As they work, their eyes are drawn to the figures emerging from the crew room. The pilots, the few, as they are starting to be called. The easy bravado of the mess hall is gone, replaced by a quiet, weary deliberation. They've been flying 4, sometimes 5 sorties a day since July. The adrenaline that once sustained them has been burned away, leaving a deep, bone-aching fatigue. Their faces are pale beneath their summer tans, etched with lines of strain that shouldn't be long on men so young. They have seen too many friends, too many comrades, disappear in a sudden, violent flash of flame, or simply vanish into the gray waters of the Channel, their final mayday calls dissolving into static. One of them, Pilot Officer John Dizzy Allen of 609th Squadron, climbs onto the wing root of his Spitfire. He gives a silent nod to Tom, the ground crewman. No words are necessary. Theirs is a symbiotic relationship, an unspoken pact. The pilot's life depends entirely on the rigger's skill. The rigger's purpose is vested in the pilot's safe return. As Allen straps himself into the cramped cockpit, Tom hands him the harness buckle. For a fleeting second, their eyes meet, a shared acknowledgement of trust, and of the profound dread that hangs over this airfield. Suddenly, the harsh, jarring clatter of the tannoy speaker shatters the morning calm. The metallic voice rings out across the field. 609th Squadron, scramble. Angels 1-5, Vector 100. Bandits approaching Beachy Head. The effect is electric. In an instant, the crushing weariness is sloughed off like a heavy coat. The pilots are transformed. Allen snaps his goggles down over his eyes and gives Tom a quick thumbs up. Tom slides off the wing, shouting contact at the top of his lungs, and ducks clear as another ground crewman swings the heavy inertia starter. The propeller jerks once, twice, then blurs into a smooth, roaring disk of motion. All across the field, Merlin engines cough to life, one after another, the sound building into a thunderous, earth-shaking chorus. The very ground vibrates with their power. One by one, the Spitfires and Hurricanes bounce over the patched craters on the runway. They gather speed, their delicate, lethal shapes lifting gracefully into the morning sky. They climb, forming up into tight, disciplined sections of 4, their wings seeming to brush against each other. Inside his cockpit, Allen's world shrinks to the essentials. His eyes scan his instruments, fuel, oil pressure, temperature, then flick to the vast, empty sky. The cockpit is a symphony of sensations. The constant rattle of the airframe, the distinct smell of paint dope and hot metal, the stick vibrating in his gloved hand. He isn't thinking of Churchill's grand speeches or the fate of the nation. His thoughts are immediate, practical, his fuel gauge, his oxygen supply, and the position of the sun over the coast, knowing it will be in his eyes, but behind the enemy. They are a thin blue line, these young men. Their average life expectancy is measured not in years, but in weeks. In their own minds, they aren't heroes. They are just professionals doing a job, flying until they can fly no more, each sortie another roll of the dice against impossible odds. Back on the ground, the crews watch the spakes of their aircraft disappear to the southeast, their powerful roar fading into a distant hum. Tom Perkins picks up an oily rag and wipes his hands. His part in this drama done, for now. He turns his attention back to the next aircraft in the line, its engine silent, its cockpit empty. It waits for his care, or for the return of its pilot. The battle here is a relentless cycle: scramble, fight, land, repair, repeat. It is a machine of men and metal, stretched to its absolute limit, holding the line one dawn, one sortie at a time. This was the Battle of Britain, September 17, 1940. We are at 26,000 feet, high above the gray waters of the English Channel. Oberleutnant Erich Meyer of the famed Jagdgeschwader 26 feels his Bf 109 shudder. He banks hard, eyes tracking the RAF Spitfires as they dive for the safety of the English coast. But, as he watches them go, his attention is ripped back to his own cockpit. The engine's powerful snarl has changed. It's now a labored, almost sickly wheeze, and there it is, the persistent, accusing red glow of the low fuel warning light. He's just survived 12 minutes in a brutal, turning dogfight with a pack of Spitfires. In the world of aerial combat, 12 minutes is an eternity. He'd managed to score hits on one, saw it trailing smoke, but couldn't confirm the kill. And now, his fight is over, not because of enemy guns, but because of simple mathematics. Over the radio, his voice is sharp with frustration. All Eagles, this is Eagle 1, fuel critical. Breaking off for base, he pushes the stick forward, beginning the long, 60-mile glide back towards occupied France. This was the German fighter pilot's curse, a grim reality they called the Krankheit, the Channel sickness. Their magnificent Messerschmitt Bf 109s, arguably the best fighters in the sky at the start of the war, had a fatal flaw for this specific campaign: endurance. A full tank gave them about 80 minutes of flight time. 20 of those minutes were spent just getting across the channel, another 20 for the return journey. That left them, at best, with around 30 to 40 minutes over England, but a high-G, twisting dogfight, with the engine at full combat power, could burn through that fuel in a fraction of the time. For pilots like Meyer, the most terrifying enemy wasn't the Spitfire in their six, but the fuel gauge on their dashboard. Looking down, Meyer sees the German bomber formations, the Heinkels and Dorniers, also turning back. Their missions are being aborted. Some drop their bomb loads hastily on secondary targets, while others carry the deadly cargo all the way back to France. Without their fighter escort, they are incredibly vulnerable, strung out and bleeding as the British fighters, who could afford to stay, harry them all the way back to the coast. The Luftwaffe's grand strategy, so brilliantly executed over Poland and France, is starting to unravel, not because of a lack of courage or skill from its pilots, but from a fundamental miscalculation of geography and logistics. Back on the ground at the forward airfield at Cap Grisnez, the atmosphere is thick with grim exhaustion. Mechanics swarm over the returning 109s, refueling and rearming them at a frantic pace for the next sortie. But the pilots, the aces of the Luftwaffe, slump onto ammunition crates. They smoke silently, their flying suits stained with sweat and oil. The celebrated commander of JG-26, Adolf Galland, listens to his pilot's reports, his face a stony mask. He had famously and bravely told the head of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring, that to win this battle, what he really needed was a squadron of Spitfires. Göring, to put it mildly, was not amused, but Galen wasn't joking. He wasn't questioning the quality of his own planes or men. He was pointing out the impossible strategic situation they were in. The fundamental asymmetry of the battle was now laid bare for all to see. Think about it. When a British pilot like John Allen, whom we met earlier, is shot down over Kent, if he survives and bails out, he parachutes onto friendly soil. He might have a cup of tea with the farmer who finds him, get a lift back to his base, and be in a brand new aircraft, ready for the next scramble, by that evening. But when Erich Meyer's comrade goes down, he is lost forever. He either drowns in the cold, unforgiving channel or becomes a prisoner of war. The Royal Air Force is bleeding. Yes, but it's bleeding over its own hospital, with a system ready to patch up its pilots and planes and send them back into the fight. The Luftwaffe is bleeding to death over hostile territory. This brutal reality was compounded by a critical German mistake. In early September, frustrated by the RAF's refusal to be destroyed, the Luftwaffe shifted its focus from bombing airfields and radar stations to bombing London and other cities. This was the start of the Blitz. While terrifying and devastating for the civilians below, this shift was a strategic gift to RAF Fighter Command. It gave them the breathing room they desperately needed. Key sector stations like Biggin Hill, though battered, remained operational. The radar chain, the vital dowding system, was intact. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, commanding the crucial No. 11 Group defending London, could now use his intelligence much more effectively. He knew, with reasonable certainty, where the Germans were going: London. This allowed him to stop scrambling frantically to cover multiple potential targets. He could concentrate his squadrons, marshal his forces, and position them perfectly to intercept the incoming raids. The German failure to destroy Britain's command and control system in August was now haunting every single raid in September. Every time the bombers appeared, the British fighters were waiting for them. The attrition rate was becoming unsustainable for the Luftwaffe. They were losing experienced crews and valuable aircraft at a rate they simply could not replace, especially so far from home. A dreadful question began to form, whispered in the high command conferences in Berlin and spoken with weary resignation at the front-line airfields in France. What if this cannot be won? The Battle of Britain wasn't just being fought in the skies. It was a war of production, of logistics, of repair, and of resilience. The RAF's true tenacity wasn't just in shooting down bombers. It was in their incredible ability to survive, to repair their infrastructure, and to get back into the fight, day after grueling day. They forced the Luftwaffe into a war of attrition, a type of war the Germans were uniquely ill-equipped to fight in this specific context. So every time a Messerschmitt pilot like Erich Meyer was forced to break off combat, every time he had to turn for home, with his fuel light blinking and plenty of ammunition still in his guns, it was a small, silent victory for that thin blue line of defenders. It was a victory not won by a bullet, but by the tyranny of distance and the simple, brutal math of an engine thirsty for fuel. The tide of the battle was turning, not with a single, dramatic clash, but with thousands of individual decisions just like this one, dictated by a needle dropping towards empty. September 30th, 1940. RAF Duxford, Cambridgeshire. Inside the No. 242 Canadian Squadron Dispersal Hut, the air is thick. You can smell the wet wool of their uniforms, the lingering cigarette smoke, and the strong, bitter tea that fuels them. Outside, rain streaks the windows, a welcome but temporary reprieve. The fighters are grounded, and for a few precious moments, the roar of Merlin engines is replaced by the patter of rain and the low murmur of tired voices. In this makeshift sanctuary, the true cost of the summer's long, brutal battle is etched into the faces of the living. Squadron Leader Douglas Bader, the legendary pilot who flies with no legs, stumps across the room on his artificial limbs. His voice is a commanding bark, cutting through the weary atmosphere as he discusses interception tactics with his young pilots. Bader is a living defiance, a symbol of sheer will triumphing over physical limits. His very presence seems to shout that nothing is impossible. But he is just one man. Around the room, others sit in their own quiet defiance. There's Pilot Officer George Screwball Burling, a young Canadian with an almost unnerving serenity. He's sketching aircraft in a small notepad, his mind constantly at work, analyzing angles of deflection, calculating the perfect shot. He is a born killer in the sky, a natural predator in a Spitfire. In another corner, Sergeant James Ginger Lacey, a Yorkshireman who rose from the ranks, quietly reads a battered book. He's already an ace many times over, but his hands, so steady on the controls, hide a tremor after each sortie. These men aren't the chivalrous knights you see in propaganda posters. They are tired, skilled professionals. They've developed a hunter-esque cold efficiency and a survivor-esque superstitious rituals to get through each day. Bader's voice rises again. Right, listen up. They'll come again when this clears. Remember, the bombers are the meat. Get in, hit them hard, break away before the 109s latch on. Fight in the vertical, use the sun. His tactics are aggressive, relentless, just like him, but they aren't universally accepted. In other squadrons, other aces have their own doctrines, their own theories on how to best survive and win. The tenacity of the Royal Air Force in some monolithic, unified strategy. It's a complex mosaic of individual brilliance, stubbornness, and sometimes clashing egos. It's a constant debate between the aggressive instincts of pilots like Bader and the more cautious, strategic control of Air Vice Marshal Keith Park and Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, the men orchestrating the entire defense. The hut door creaks open, letting in a gust of damp, cold air. A new pilot stands in the doorway, fresh from operational training unit. He looks impossibly young, his uniform too crisp, his face unlined by exhaustion and fear. The low conversation dies for a moment. The veteran's eyes turn to him, assessing him not with hostility, but with a weary, unspoken knowledge. They see themselves from 2 months ago. They see a statistic waiting to happen. Someone breaks the silence, tossing him a pack of cigarettes. A voice says, without any malice, "You'll need these." This is the brutal, unsentimental economy of the battle. The few were never a static band of heroes. They were a constantly draining and replenishing resource. For every veteran lost, a new, inexperienced boy was sent to fill his place. The survivors, the aces like Bader and Lacey, carried an immense psychological burden. They developed what would later be called the 1,000-yard stare, a profound detachment that was necessary to simply function, to climb back into the cockpit day after day. They celebrated their victories in the mess hall at night with a forced, loud gaiety, drinking and singing to chase away the horrors of the day. But in the quiet hours, alone with their thoughts, they saw the faces of the men they had killed. They saw the German bomber pilot in his stricken Heinkel, his aircraft trailing smoke. They saw the young Jagdflieger in his Messerschmitt, spiraling down in flames. In those moments, the enemy wasn't some faceless Nazi from a poster. He was another airman, a man doing his job in a different uniform, who wouldn't be going home. The tenacity of these pilots was something deeply personal. It was forged in a crucible of constant mortal fear and unbearable loss. It was the tenacity to strap into a narrow cockpit knowing your chances of survival were slim. It was the tenacity to return to the sky when every instinct in your body screamed at you to hide, to stay on the ground. It was the tenacity to lead a new boy into combat, knowing he would probably not last the week. It was Bader's stubborn refusal to be grounded by his disability. It was Lacey's meticulous, deadly gunnery. It was Burling's detached, mathematical precision in the chaos of a dogfight. They held the line, not for some grand, abstract ideal of freedom, but for something much more immediate. They did it for the man flying in the next cockpit, for their friend on their wing. They did it for the ground crews who worked tirelessly through the night, patching up their battered planes with skill and dedication. And they did it for the civilians burning in the streets of London and Coventry, people they had never met, but whose fate rested entirely on their exhausted shoulders. As the rain begins to lighten, a glimmer of brightness appears in the sky. And then, the harsh crackle of the tannoy loudspeaker cuts through the quiet. The brief respite is over. The enemy is coming. Books are closed. Cigarettes are stubbed out. The pilots rise to their feet as one. There's a collective, weary sigh, swallowed by the rustle of leather jackets and the clicking of parachute harnesses. They walk back out into the damp air, towards their waiting Spitfires and Hurricanes. They don't walk as invincible warriors or mythological heroes. They are flawed, frightened men, but they are also indomitably brave. They are the last line of defense. The battle is far from over, but in their very presence, in their dogged, determined return to their machines. October 31st, 1940, a cold drizzle falls on a Luftwaffe airfield near Calais, France. The morning is quiet. The Junkers bombers of Kampfgeschwader 30 sit motionless, their engines cold, their bomb bays empty. The frantic pre-dawn roar of activity that has defined the last few months is gone. An eerie silence has settled over the coast. Hauptmann Werner Baumann stands under a hangar, watching the gray veil over the channel. For the first time in months, the operational board is clear. No major raids are planned for today. This isn't because of the weather. It's because of a command, a decision that has trickled down from the very top. It's a reality accepted not with a dramatic announcement, but with a quiet, suffocating sense of failure. Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, has been postponed indefinitely. The one thing needed to make it happen, the Luftwaffe's absolute control of the skies, has not been achieved. And now, it's clear it never will be. The battle of attrition has been lost. The statistics are a silent, damning verdict. Since July, the Luftwaffe has lost over 1,800 aircraft. But the real crippling blow is the loss of over 2,600 experienced aircrew killed, wounded, or captured. The training schools back in Germany simply can't replace them this fast. The pilots who remain are haunted, hollow-eyed, suffering from what doctors are just beginning to call operational exhaustion. The once invincible Messerschmitts are now feared by their own pilots for their limited range over hostile territory. The bomber crews, who flew mission after terrifying mission into the fiery defenses of London, have finally reached their breaking point. Morale, that invisible, essential force, has crumbled. Across the channel, the assessment is the same, but the feeling is starkly different. It's one of grim, almost disbelieving relief. In the underground operations room at Bentley Priory, the Gent map table is unsettlingly clear. There are no massed formations of enemy aircraft cluttering the airspace over the channel. The WAF plotters stand by their boards, their long rakes idle. The silence here is profound. Air Chief Marshal Dowding, the architect of Britain's air defense, allows a rare, almost imperceptible release of tension in his shoulders. His strategy of carefully preserving fighter strength, his innovative system of command and control, has been vindicated. But there is no celebration. The cost of this victory is etched into the empty chairs in squadron messes all across southern England. The few have paid a heavy price. At airfields like Biggin Hill, the scars of battle are everywhere in the cratered earth and the hastily patched buildings. But amidst the damage, there's a new energy. The immediate, unbearable pressure has finally lifted. Ground crews, men like Tom Perkins, can now perform proper, deep maintenance on the Hurricanes and Spitfires, instead of just frantic, desperate battle damage repairs between sorties. Pilots can finally sleep for more than a few hours at a time. The focus is subtly shifting. It's moving from pure, minute-by-minute survival to rebuilding, to training new pilots, and to preparing for the long, hard war that still lies ahead. The victory in the Battle of Britain wasn't marked by a surrender ceremony or a victory parade. It was marked by this silence. It was a victory of prevention. The German invasion barges, waiting in the ports of France and Belgium, would remain there, rotting. The planned occupation of Britain became a ghost, a chilling chapter of a history that never happened. The tenacity of the Royal Air Force had achieved something monumental. From Dowding's cold strategic calculus and Air Vice Marshal Park's masterful command in the field to the incredible skill of the pilots from Britain and nations all over the world to the tireless sweat of the ground crews who kept them flying, it was a total effort. All of it was underpinned by the game-changing technology of radar and supported by the unwavering courage of civilians on the ground, who endured the bombs in the burning streets below. Together, they had achieved one crucial thing. They had bought time. They had proven, for the first time, that Hitler's war machine could be stopped. As the drizzle continues to fall on both sides of the channel, the true meaning of this silence becomes clear. Britain will endure, the war will go on, and it will soon escalate into a global conflict far beyond what anyone could imagine. But this island fortress, saved by the few and the many who supported them, will remain. It will be an unsinkable aircraft carrier, a beacon of resistance in a continent shrouded in darkness. And it will be the foundation from which, years later, the liberation of Europe will be launched. The battle fought in the bright summer skies of 1940 is over. But a longer, harder fight, one that will be waged in the darkness for years to come, is just beginning. Thanks for watching. If you found this story of the unseen victory compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more hidden histories from the Second World War. We'll see you next time.